Good evening. We are 1 hour late on schedule, so I hope you are not too nantuk or chape to follow. And my session will be a little bit more technical and theoretical than the previous sessions. I hope I will not make you too bored. So I will talk about understanding economics to promote liberty, and I will make the case of entrepreneurship and innovation. We can move, next slide. Okay, these are my qualifications, you can skip. Okay, I believe that there are two approaches that can be followed in order to promote liberty. One is what I call the moral, cultural, or ideological perspective, and the second one is the theoretical or technical perspective. Later I will give you some example. Of course, both perspectives are indeed useful to promote liberty and are complementary. But I think that the second one is a bit neglected. So, which are examples of a moral, cultural, or ideological perspective to promote liberty? In example, when we say, who can take care of my own property better than me? This is a cultural argument that was already raised by Aristotle, in example, or St. Thomas. Or on which ground can government take part of my honestly earned income? And therefore we conclude that taxation is theft, and it violates the 7th and the 10th Christian commandments, which are done, I don't know how to say in English, but you understand what I mean. The third one is the violation of individual rights. Okay, next slide. An example instead of the theoretical and technical perspective is what happened with the so-called socialist economic calculation debate that happened starting in the 20s. And it involved from the Austrian side Mises and Hayek, and later on in the 80s Don Lavoie. And is the typical approach of the Austrian school against socialism. So socialism can indeed be condemned on a moral ideological ground, the violation of individual rights such as private property, the tendency toward corruptions, or the pretense to know what is good for the people better than the people themselves. But, next slide, Mises and later on Hayek and Lavoie developed another kind of argument. They by using economic theory, they demonstrate how socialism simply cannot work. On a practical level, is a logical contradiction. So, with their argument, they challenge the contenders on a different ground. Let's say that even if you sympathize with the socialist cause, or we have to help the poor, redistribution, and etc., in front of the arguments from Hayek, Mises, and Lavoie, you must surrender because of the logical contradiction of socialism and therefore its impracticability. Basically, their argument is an argument grounded on the problems of information, knowledge, and the role of prices. Now, in this session, I cannot go deeply into the socialist economic calculation debate, but at the end of my presentation, you will find a long list of references. I'm quite an old-style lecturer, so half of my presentations is usually a list of references. So for the one among you that would like to have this presentation, you'll find a long list of readings that you can easily find online in order to improve your knowledge of the topic. So, via this argument, Mises was indeed able to predict the end of socialism in 1920. And this was a great theoretical victory that was, of course, understood by economists only many years later. When you think that the Nobel Prize, Paul Samuelson, in his famous textbooks on economics in 1989, was writing that USSR example is a good example of how socialism can indeed work and be even a better option than free market economy. He was writing this in 1989, so exactly few months before communism collapsed in all the world, while Mises, via his technical argument, was able to demonstrate that socialism and communism cannot survive already in 1920, so just 3 years after the Soviet Revolution. We are celebrating this year the 100th anniversary of that glorious revolution. Next slide. So, I believe that we need to achieve, in the realm of the libertarian environment, more Mises targets. We are called to do what Mises did, doing good economic prediction using economic theory. And the freedom cause needs well theoretically equipped knights. So a sound economic background looks like, for me, the best prerequisite in the next steps in the struggle for freedom. And indeed, remember what Rothbard was used to say, it is not a crime to be ignorant of economics, but it is totally irresponsible to have a loud and vociferous opinion on economic subjects while remaining in this state of ignorance. And this is not regarding only our enemies, the socialists. This is a challenge also for all of us. How many of us are actually trained into economics? So of course I'm not claiming that everybody needs to become an economist, but I'm just saying that in our environment we need maybe better trained economists, not only on policy applications, but also on theoretical foundations. So we cannot simply read The Road to Serfdom by Hayek. There is a lot of literature about business cycles, about monetary problems, about inflation, about capital theory, that probably only few people in our environment read, because it's very difficult. It takes you a lot of energy to go through. But we must know, we must dominate these topics. Next, please. So, I will use this argument as the topic of this session is related with entrepreneurship and innovation. I decided to devote the second part to understand better what is entrepreneurship. So we will try to understand the connection between entrepreneurship, technological change, innovation, and government plan in order to promote free market. In order to do so, we will use two travel companions, both already quoted in past sessions. Schumpeter, I think you are all familiar with Joseph Schumpeter and the concept of creative destruction, but don't be misguided. Schumpeter was an Austrian economist by birth, but not an Austrian economist in the sense that he belonged to the Austrian School of Economics. This is not the case. He was a student of Ben Bawerk, but he never belonged to the Austrian School of Economics. And then Israel Kirzner, which instead is one of the living masters of the Austrian School of Economics. For me, even if their theory of entrepreneurship are often presented as in conflict, I find that instead they are complementary authors in understanding what entrepreneurship is, how it is connected to the market process, and how it can eventually generate innovation. Next, please. So this is a nice picture of Schumpeter in a moment of holiday. I strongly invite you to read a lot about his biography because it's better than a novel. He married 3 times, he had a lot of adventures, he was used to hang out with his students drinking whiskey. So he was quite an interesting person, and I had the luck in my life to study for 1 year with one of his students, just the year before he passed away, and I graduated with him. For Schumpeter, the concept of entrepreneurship is strongly related with the concept of innovation, as we know, and he is the promoter of the concept of creative destruction. So in the market, the new invention, the new innovations, destroy what is old. I told you it's the promoter of this concept, not the inventor, because actually is still this concept from Werner Sombart, which is a German economist that was never translated into English in the past years, and therefore Schumpeter, publishing in English, had an easier game to promote this idea. In the idea of Schumpeter, moreover, entrepreneurship is a sort of state of grace. Only few people are actually entrepreneurs, and only for a limited period of time. So it's not a status destined to everybody and to remain over time. Finally, for Schumpeter, entrepreneurship and innovation move the system from a status of equilibrium toward a status of disequilibrium, and then again the economic system is moved to equilibrium via business cycles, which means via boom and bust. Next. Kirchner, and of course I'm simplifying these theories, we don't have time to go into that. For Kirchner instead, entrepreneurship is defined as alertness to previously unexploited profit opportunities. And therefore, entrepreneurship is generated by market ignorance. Because the content of information, the knowledge of the actors in the market is limited, at a certain point, certain actors can benefit from a higher level of alertness to certain kind of information, and therefore receive a sort of benefit because of their superior alertness. And market is a process in which the key is indeed the exchange of information. It's the place where we all come into contact in order to exchange bits of information that are dispersed in our minds. And contrary with Schumpeter, for Kirchner, the role of entrepreneurs in the market is not to move the system from disequilibrium to equilibrium, but rather the opposite, moving from a constant status of disequilibrium to a higher level of equilibrium, but intended in a Hayekian sense, as a higher degree of coordination. Nothing to do with the Varasian equilibrium that you studied in your horrible textbooks. Next. But these authors present some element in common. Both started their economic reflections from a status of unhappiness with what mainstream economics is or was at the time of Schumpeter. In fact, for both of them, mainstream economics is neglecting the process nature of the market. Market is indeed a process. It's not a status, it's not a static place, but is a process, which means an exchange of information that is continuously happening over time. Second point, mainstream economics neglects the nature of real time. I cannot go too much into depth on this, but this is a crucial aspect in economic theory and the difference between Austrian economics and mainstream economics. The real time, to make it simple, the flow of the real time is a flow that allows to everything to change. When you move into the market and you start to act, to implement your plan in order to fulfill your expectations, everything can happen. And the most important thing is that you are acquiring new information. And in front of new information, of course, your expectations can change. And therefore, your plans can change. Or your plans can be frustrated, which means you are losing money. You are not fulfilling your expectations. Okay? This is something that in mainstream economics is neglected. Because when you have the sensation that indeed mainstream economics is dealing with time, this is a fake conception of time. Because in the beautiful graphs that you find on your textbooks, in moving from time 1 to time 2, nothing actually happens. there is no possibility for change to happen. No new knowledge is brought into the system. While your daily experience of the market is that the only thing that is constant is change. Finally, for both Schumpeter and Kirchner, the mainstream economics is neglecting real human beings acting in the real world. Homo economicus doesn't exist. A man with perfect knowledge, ability of perfect forecasts, doesn't exist. So why should we use some instrument like that in order to do our economic theory, if actually men like that are not real men? And therefore, both Kirchner and Schumpeter try to introduce into economic theory the role of real acting man that has an imperfect knowledge. Moreover, both authors identifies entrepreneurship as a specific feature. Alertness for Kirchner versus innovation ability for Schumpeter. But the big difference is alertness for Kirchner is potentially in everybody, while innovation skills for Schumpeter are only in special men. Next. So I tried personally to reconcile Kirchner with Schumpeter. I like to take features from different economists and see if we can build more on the common aspects instead of marking the divisions. So, in order to do so, I identify three categories. The first one is the so-called Misesian's human action, which is something that you are all familiar, I believe. That means the choice of the means-ends framework. Means when we start to do something, Mises says we are all purposeful acting beings. When we do something, when we wake up in the morning, we do so in order to achieve something. Otherwise, better stay in bed. Tidur saja, right? Di sana, orang-orang tidur. Wake up. Purposefulness of your action. You are here for a reason. And when we choose our ends means framework, then we set up a plan in order to achieve our expectations, and we implement that plan. Because a plan that is not actually implemented is not a plan. If you want to conquer a girl, you cannot simply write down a strategy. You must invite her out sooner or later, right? Right or no? Yeah, good. Bagus. So, when you start to implement this plan, you enter the game, the process of information transmission. And this is how market process actually start to move itself. Next. The second category that I reintroduce is the Kirchnerian entrepreneurship as alertness. So for Kirchner, among the plans that we have seen in the first category are smarter or quicker than others in identifying unexploited profit opportunities. Which means that some people has the ability to see where a good can be sold at a price higher than that for which it can be bought. This is one of the simple features of alertness for Kirchner. Noticing profit opportunities that exist because of the initial ignorance of the original market participants. So some people are smarter in noticing these profit opportunities. So among all the plans, some result to be more successful because are able to identify profit opportunities better than others. And I give a simple example. I was discussing with my friend here before. I'm an Italian, and as you know, we are the best makers of espresso and pizza, right? thanks. However, Italians didn't become rich with espresso and pizza. Who did? Americans, with the black hot water of Starbucks and the bad bread with bad cheese of Pizza Hut. Which even doesn't know what tomato sauce is, right? So this means, this of course is a burden for me as an Italian man. I feel bad about that. But this means that Americans were more alert to the profit opportunities that could come out from pizza and coffee. And they realized, better than Italians, that there was a market for that, a worldwide market for that, right? And so, when I started to come here, and people brought me, knowing that I'm Italian, started to bring me to Pizza Hut, well, I started to discover a world, because we don't have Pizza Hut in Italy, and we don't have Starbucks. So really, when I started to travel here in the region, and when I moved to the region, I didn't know what Starbucks was. I didn't know what Pizza Hut was. And I found that they are so popular here, and people identify that with Italian food. It was a big pain. But indeed, this proved that what is entrepreneurship, what is alertness. And this proved also that in the market, not always the best product wins. Wins the more alert to profit opportunities. So, as an Italian, I can swear that not the best pizza, the most popular one. You are eating Hawaiian pizza, right? With nanas and ayam on pizza, right? Yeah, that is pretty. Next slide. So, for Kirchner, what a pure entrepreneur is a decision maker whose entire role arises out of his alertness to profit opportunities. So it's a simple, in a way, role. Not so simple, but is a very specific function. The most distinctive feature of Kirchnerian entrepreneurial function is to move the market from a disequilibrium status toward equilibrium, which means, as I told you before, toward a higher level of coordination. What does it mean? And coming back to the example of Pizza Hut, before Mr. Pizza Hut started to his own pizza, of course, he realized that might have found profit opportunities. But of course, this implies also a sort of risk. He didn't have any guarantee that his pizza could sell a lot, right? But in a way, in the moment in which he found out that his pizza was successful, he was moving the market toward a higher level of coordination, in the sense that people that before had the desire for pizza but didn't know where to get pizza started to fulfill their expectation for pizza, started to find pizza in the market. In this way, the entrepreneurial role was a role to bring different expectations to meet each other. The desire for pizza, the demand for pizza, with someone supplying pizza. Because Italian people were too lazy to come here to make pizza. Even they didn't know where Indonesia was, right? Next, please. For Schumpeter, entrepreneurship is something a bit different. He identifies 5 ways that he calls new combinations or innovations. And they are the introduction of new goods, the introduction of a new method of production, the opening of a new market, the conquest of a new source of supply of raw materials, and the carrying out of a new organization of an industry. So, for Schumpeter, entrepreneurial role is to bring in innovations which are falling into these 5 categories. Next. So, the entrepreneur for him is a sort of leader able to introduce this new combination And entrepreneurship identifies with leadership. So it's something that is in a way beyond strict rationality. The romantic entrepreneur that Schumpeter has in mind at the beginning of his career as an economist is someone that is able to bet everything on an idea. And therefore, there is a special role for intuition. Imagine the big revolution that computers brought in against typing machines. How many of you know how to use a typing machine? No? Even you don't know what a typing machine is. Wow, it's awful. I studied typing in my high school, and I'm still in my 30s. So I'm not that older compared to you. But so even less than 20 years ago, I was studying how to use a typing machine in my school. You even never heard about a typing machine, your generation. And this is very peculiar because the time gap is not so big. So computer completely removed typing machines from daily activity. When I was in my high school, it was a normal instrument in the office. So imagine the big intuition that the people bringing in the computer had, and how this changed our way to do things. But moreover, for Schumpeter, there are special motivations that are very peculiar for the entrepreneur as an innovator. First of all, and this is quoted literally from Schumpeter, there is the dream and the will to found a private kingdom, usually not necessarily also a dynasty. So the nearest approach to medieval lordship possible to modern man. So for him, the entrepreneur is like an old lord. Then there is the will to conquer, the impulse to fight, to prove oneself superior to others, to succeed for the sake, not of the fruit of success, but for success itself. Winning for the sake of winning. Finally, there is the joy of creating, okay? Of getting things done, or simply of exercise one's energy and ingenuity. Okay? So these are the typical features of the Schumpeterian entrepreneur. Next. So how I combine these three categories in a way that aims to reconcile Schumpeter and Kirchner. We have the general category of human action, the big blue circle. I would say that entrepreneurship is a subset. The Kirchnerian entrepreneurship is a subset of human action, and the Schumpeterian entrepreneurship, the one leading to radical change in the way in which we do things, is the Schumpeterian entrepreneurship, which is a subset of the Kirchnerian entrepreneurship. So I would say that they are not inconsistent with each other, but rather Schumpeterian entrepreneur is a subset of the Kirchnerian entrepreneur. So in general, we all do entrepreneurial actions when we implement our plans and we try to be alert to profit opportunities. But among all our plans and our human actions and entrepreneurial actions, there are special entrepreneurial actions which consequences are much higher, are revolutionary. So I would say that the Schumpeterian category is narrower than the Kirchnerian, narrower, but not necessarily inconsistent. It's a subset, okay? Some entrepreneurs bring to the world more radical consequences than others. We all can agree that the introducer of internet introduced an innovation which is probably more radical than the one that started to produce this kind of bracelets, okay? But the one that is making money with these bracelets is also an entrepreneur. But the consequences for the economic world of the inventor of internet are revolutionary, are innovations in the Schumpeterian sense. Is it clear where I'm going? Are you with me? Yes. Good. Next. So, the final part of my presentation. Are entrepreneurship and innovation possible without free market? Because here we come to our challenge as champions of liberty. Schumpeter in 1942 was actually thinking that entrepreneurial capitalism was at the end of its history. The role of entrepreneurs was about to end, to be replaced by corporations and government-led development. He was sad about this. When he's writing this, you can perceive his romantic sadness. But he was also admitting that an eventual oligopolistic corporation or government-led capitalism could work. And he's writing in this book, Capitalism, Socialism and Democracy, come on, only Professor Mises is believing the contrary. But if we have a deeper look at the question, is government intervention promoting or blocking entrepreneurship and its potential innovative attitude? Next, please. So, one of the most important features for entrepreneurship is, as we have seen, to manage information. Both in Kirchnerian and Schumpeterian scenarios, information is key. In fact, alertness is a special way to manage knowledge and to communicate information. Okay? The one bringing Pizza Hut to the world is betting on the fact that people have the need for pizza, so he's betting on a knowledge, okay, on an intuition. And also the Schumpeterian innovation is based on intuition, which is in a way a special kind of information. What is intuition? Is potential information, assumption about information that can become reality. So, as we have mentioned before, the information and knowledge problem is the key argument in the Mises argument against socialism. So in this way, we reconnect the Misesian case against socialism together with our theory of entrepreneurship. Next, please. Gak boleh tidur ya? Alertness. So, we have one problem. First problem is that central planner cannot be entrepreneurial because of the specific nature of information and knowledge. In fact, look at the information. What is information? Which are the features of information? Information is dispersed. Every one of you has different kind of information. But this information is also stuck in your head, is tacit. You are not going around with signboards, say, hey, this is the content of information I have. You have there, and you keep elaborating on it, right? So in a way, it's not explicitly communicated. And moreover, it's ever-changing. You might think you love Justin Bieber, but after you start listening to Pink Floyd, you cannot like Justin Bieber anymore. Happy to hear so many supporters of Pink Floyd.
Or haters of Justin Bieber.
Or haters, yeah, true. So, entrepreneurship is based on information which is formed in the market and then exchanged through the market. So, information has a provisional nature, okay? And this information is transmitted via prices. Prices, we cannot go in depth also on this, are the best vehicle of information transmission, okay? Because of course, prices are an objective number, but they are the result of a lot of subjective evaluations. So let's say, how many rupias is an iPhone? Berapa rupiah? 10 millions? 8 millions? 7 millions? 7 millions. So, if iPhone is successful, right? In the market. Many of you have, right? Okay. What does it mean? And therefore, Apple is making profit. So it means that in the market, in Indonesia or worldwide, there is a big number of persons that is available to spend 7 million rupees rather than saving them, or rather than eating pizza with their money, or buying Pink Floyd CDs, that allow Apple to make profit. So in that 7 millions, you have contained the information that Apple is making profit, and then there are a lot of people spending it, but not only many people spending money to buy it at 7 million, but while spending 7 million on the iPhone, they are at the same time telling that they prefer to spend 7 million on that rather than on other things. So that 7 million is telling us a lot about personal preferences. Okay? And why under government control this is not possible? Simply because if you take out the market, or in a way you block the market with government regulation, you are impeding the market to work as it should. And if prices are actually formed and in the market and information is transmitted only into the market, if you take out the market, you take out the price. And without price, you cannot have rational calculation. You cannot calculate if you are losing money or making profit. And this is the reason why to say the word government entrepreneurship or government intervention is already a contradiction, because you cannot have entrepreneurial calculus with government, because you take out the market, which is the place where prices arise, and without prices you don't know if you are losing money or you are making profit. This is the first problem. Satulagi? Problem number 2. Central planner cannot regulate entrepreneurial activity because in such a way it would alter the knowledge content. This is something that we see with business cycle. With government regulation, entrepreneurial action would be based on wrong signals, artificially created. This is one of the basic arguments of the so-called Austrian business cycle theory. Imagine the interest rate. The interest rate is measuring the so-called intertemporal structure of preferences. So it's telling us if an economic system is present-oriented or future-oriented. And therefore, the best way to have the most reliable price, the most reliable interest rate measuring the attitude toward present and future would be to allow the market to make its job, to get the price that reflects the interaction between supply and demand. But in all our economies, the interest rate is not fixed by the market, but by central banks, on the assumption that they know which is the level that would arise eventually in the market. And therefore, they send to the market a wrong signal with a wrong price. And having in the market a wrong signal, guided by central authority rather by the interaction of demand and supply, we have a highest probability of wrong entrepreneurial decisions. For Mises, this is the biggest cause of boom and bust cycles. Moreover, the innovation instinct would be replaced by the attempt of getting favors from the regulator. And from the innovative capitalism, we would move to chronic capitalism, corrupted capitalism. I think in Indonesia you know something about chronic capitalism. Soeharto family? Yeah? Sounds familiar? Soekarno Putra, Soekarno Putri, etc. Next. In synthesis, government cannot replace entrepreneurs and government cannot regulate entrepreneurship. This is because complexity is a network of dispersed minds and coordination is possible, is effective, guaranteed a better outcome only via a free discovery process. Next. Next. Summary: human action generates market processes. In the market, entrepreneurs emerge as people peculiarly alert to unexploited property opportunities, and this is the Kirchnerian alertness. Among Kirchnerian entrepreneurs, innovators emerge as special beings introducing groundbreaking combinations, and this is the Schumpeterian creative destruction. Government cannot be entrepreneur because of the information problem that we have seen. And moreover, government cannot regulate entrepreneurship because in this way would create a disincentive for innovation and an incentive for crony capitalism. Market therefore works at its best if free, generating information, allowing price mechanism to increase coordination, and allowing innovators to be so. Don't take me wrong, when we say that market do a good job, we don't have in mind any concept of general equilibrium. So market is not creating any kind of equilibrium. Market is helping creating coordination among people. It's the place where people exchange information and increase the level of mutual coordination. So when we talk about the good outcome of the market, we have in mind a level of degree of mutual coordination between people, not a certain static equilibrium benchmark. That doesn't exist. It's only in the mind of economists. It's not in the reality. So, if someone tells you that market is not perfect, it's perfectly true. Every human creation is not perfect. But market works better than government because allow people to freely exchange information and therefore help in reaching a higher degree of coordination. This is far from a perfect state of equilibrium. But I would say that rather than living in a perfect state of equilibrium, I prefer to live in the exciting, kaleidoscopic reality in which we are living every day. Thanks. Here you have 10 pages of references for deepening the knowledge of the topic. If some of you is interested, you can just drop me an email, and I will be happy to send all the necessary material. Thanks.
How many pages of slides do you have? How many slides?
How many slides?
Of references.
10 slides of references.
Good, that's nice.
Yeah.
That's great.
I spend a lot of time in planes, so I have plenty of time to read.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, what is your view on behavioral economics, which has arisen quite recently, and how it criticizes also Homo economicus in mainstream economics?
I'll criticize what?
Yes. Yeah. So I was just wondering, what is your opinion on behavioral economics that has arisen and how it criticizes Homo economicus in mainstream economics? So I'm wondering how you view behavioral economics as compared to Austrian economics.
Well, I'm not so much into behavioral economics, but of course, for sure, we can consider it as an important point in the way to introduce real men, active men, into the economic paradigm. But I still believe that the lesson from Mises and Hayek is the best way to understand how man actually acts. And probably among the Austrians, we should rediscover the lesson from Lachmann in terms of the importance of expectations. In the end, everything in the economic system can be rooted back to expectations. Without expectations, there is no life, right? So that one, I think, is the challenging ground for the next development also of Austrian economics. That is what I'm trying to do, to reintroduce radically the concept of expectations into theory. was done by Shekel. And on this, we can also find a way to get more in touch with our enemy cans. You? Yeah. Yeah, you had the question?
I just wanted to ask, what's your favorite reading from Schumpeter?
From Schumpeter, it's a difficult question. I spent all my youth on him. History of economic analysis, I think that is really his masterpiece. The theory of economic development is, of course, where all the theory of entrepreneurship is developed. By the history of economic analysis is where you can see really how he could master the discipline beyond any other economist. One there, and then here in front.
From what you say before that...
Just wait for the mic because I cannot hear you. I'm getting old.
From what you say before that it is about alertness, you know, the Kirchnerian. So should we say, because not far from here there is a Entrepreneur museum, entrepreneur things like that, and they even have a statue around the Ciputra Square there.
Okay.
So it's a very cute idea now, the entrepreneurship and things like that. And while it is alertness and special people, can we say that it is a useless idea to teach about entrepreneurship in the way they are teaching now? Because what you say is, even though we try, if governments block and then alertness can be do you agree that it is something that cannot be learned and it cannot be unlearned also? Because when you have it, just like riding a bicycle, you know how to do it, and you cannot, except you hit your head on some stone, and you can forget about it.
Well, yeah, I agree with you, and it might be strange because actually for living I work as a general manager for a multinational company, but in my life I never studied entrepreneurship. I never studied marketing, I never studied sales and all these kind of funny things, but I make a living doing sales. So I think that there is something that is basically innate in the capacity, in the entrepreneurial capacity, and business cannot be taught. I believe that business schools are really invented to steal money from the people. I mean, you learn business by doing business. You cannot study business in college, actually. If you look, most of the entrepreneurs that really made the difference in the economic system, they are even not graduated or fail to be admitted in the university or something like that. Because instead, I'm a theoretical person, but I realized that I would never be an entrepreneur, even if I studied a lot about entrepreneurship. It's something that is related with the nature of people, really. Here in front.
So is that on? Yeah, cool. So like often when I've gone to a lot of discussions about the knowledge problem, because I think it's a really, really solid critique of like state socialist mental planning. One of the interesting rebuttals I've got, especially from like more anarcho-socialists or libertarian socialists, is that there have been attempts recently to respond to the socialist calculation debate by saying that you can basically look at trends in the past of decision making.
Yeah.
So but you can basically look at patterns of consumer behaviour or changes in quantity demanded each day and consumption, and essentially you can turn it into an algorithm, and you can basically predict changes in sales simply by putting it into an algorithm, this formula, by doing some survey of the market in the first place, or just by following records, rather than necessarily having to have a strict free-for-all market system. Are you convinced by this? Do you think that there are ways that we necessarily need to have a market process, or can we use technology to overcome the calculation debate?
No, that's why also I was scared by some of the presentation yesterday about AI. In the sense that I hope I will be dead by the time in which we will have certain innovations. But in general, I believe that the working of the human mind is something that will be always one step further, one step beyond compared to any algorithm. There is always something going beyond that, in a way that can be defined irrational, but it is not irrational, because, when you think about, for example, my decision to leave everything behind and come to live here, was in a way irrational, or people doing things that looks crazy, or the people that are investing a lot in potential new technology. This is something that cannot be predicted. Bitcoin couldn't be predicted. Information is always changing in the mind of the people. Coming back to the example of music, I was used to listen when I was a teenager the usual radio rubbish, but then at a certain point my father put on an old LP by the Pink Floyd, and I realized that it was much better. And then all my spending on music, my spending habits changed. This couldn't be predicted by any algorithm, because there was no algorithm that could have predicted at a certain point my father would have decided to go to shower listening to the Pink Floyd, right? Yeah. Yeah. Here, there, a lot. They are still active.
Hi, hello.
Hi.
I actually have two questions. My first question is, in regards to the Austrian School of Economics, do you believe that do you think that there are any weaknesses to the school, or are there any gaping holes of research that can be filled? My second question is, the Austrian school is usually divided into the Cato group and the Mises group, where the latter is more focused on praxeology, and they believe that their research should not go outside the confines of praxeology. So the question is, do you believe that there can be room for the research to go outside of that rigid confines, so to speak?
Yeah, well, things are changing inside the Austrian school. Of course, there is room for things to be done. Otherwise, it doesn't justify the books that I recently published or the papers that I'm going to publish. In general, I would say that between Mises and Cato, I would pick up George Mason University. In the sense that Mises and Cato played a very important role on the developing of the knowledge of Austrian School of Economics, but probably now they are, a little bit stuck on their ideas. Sometimes I think about Mises Institute like a church, in which you have, in the name of Mises, of Rothbard and Walter Bloch, and if you are not into that stream, you are basically cut out. In fact, I tried to publish a paper which was criticizing Mises' approach to business cycle and tried to enrich the Austrian tradition of business cycle with Schumpeter and Spitov, and then was rejected. Instead, I see what is happening at George Mason University with the Mercatus Center as a new blood, a new life to the Austrian school, because they are keeping a strong knowledge of the roots, but they are bringing also knowledge from the public choice, in example, from the institutionalists. So they are trying to dialogue with other schools, with other non-mainstream schools, and they are trying to apply that big knowledge coming from our teachers to the new problems, to the emergent problem of the new world. So in this sense, if I had to suggest to some students to do an experience about free market economics in a vibrant environment, I would send them to George Mason in Virginia. There are a few questions. It depends on your time.
Thank you.
I can speak until tomorrow morning.
I have one question.
Depends on your time frame. I have to
last one. Sorry, I couldn't understand about the government can be entrepreneur. In your slide, there is the center of the information cannot be entrepreneur, but actually, like GPS is innovated by government. So why? I couldn't understand that reason.
Of course, in a mixed economy like the one we are living, in a way, government action has always to face signals that are coming from the market. So we are not living in a world of pure socialism. There are situations that are left to the market. And therefore, I would say that the rooms for government to be entrepreneurs are left by the fact that there is still a market. And therefore, government is forced to compete, to know about the market and act as if it was in a regime of free market. But if you look, even if in the realm of government some innovations can happen, later on usually they cannot flourish. This is the big, so they are left there. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. And there was the last question. Now I would like to call upon Mr. Iwan Takanugraha to give flag of appreciation to Mr. Carmelo.
Thank you.